Trust in God by Lucy Mable Wheadon, 1992. Some time ago, I was deeply moved when watching a play on television. It was about a young girl called Bernadette who claimed to have seen a vision of the Virgin Mary. Since then, I've often felt an urge to tell of a similar experience I had about 12 years ago, but somehow I could never talk about it because I felt no one would believe me, that I should be laughed at. There are several reasons why I feel I should like to write this. To begin, I have a strange feeling that God wishes me to do so. Another thing, I hope that by telling some of my own thoughts, doubts and beliefs of the past 3 years, I might be able to make someone else understand. I know it will not be easy, but at least I shall have had the satisfaction of knowing that I have tried. I'd always been brought up to believe in God. I was sent to Sunday school and then church. I got confirmed at the age of 14 and continued going to church until I was married, but I did this because it was the usual thing to do, not because it meant anything to me. I think it was in 1948 that I first realized there was more in it than just going to church and doing what we knew to be right. It was then that some church army people came to stay in the village. I went to several of their meetings and thought what good preachers they were. But it meant no more to me until one of them, called Sister Birch, held a meeting in the rectory. There was something about her that impressed me more than any other preacher had ever done before. I was convinced by the light and happiness in her face that there really was something more in what she said, but I couldn't understand what. I can still remember what she preached about. It was the life of the Virgin Mary and 2 others. After that, she spoke of the difference that Christ had made in her life since she had known him as a personal friend, and the joy and happiness that had been hers since she had known him. This was something I couldn't understand, and for months afterwards she kept coming across my mind. And all that was said to us in that meeting would come back to me, but I still wondered what she meant. Just then, I often felt the urge to go to church. I hadn't been for several years, unless it was for some special occasion. I gave it up when the children started to arrive. Then one Sunday I decided to go. It was not our own rector, but someone visiting here, an NYLC evangelist. He also spoke about the difference in his life since he had known Christ, and told of many others who had felt the same. I believe it was the end of that same year that I, like most of the village people, went down with the flu. One night I couldn't sleep, and as I lay thinking, I saw the picture of Christ on the cross. The same as we always see him in the Bible picture books, but with one difference. Big drops of blood ran down his face, where the thorns had pierced his forehead. But he was still alive, not dead. It is difficult to explain how I felt, but it was a mixture of fear and happiness. I can't explain the fear unless it was the thought of death. I don't know why, but from a very small child, I'd always thought of death as terrifying. Since then, whenever I see a picture of Christ on the cross, I can still see him as I did that night, with blood running down his face and that sad, hurt expression in his eyes. I couldn't help feeling how he was suffering. I think it was then that I realized the meaning behind the words, "He died that we might be forgiven." I knew then, as I had never done before, that it is useless trying to deceive him. He knows us as we really are. At the same time, I knew I should no longer fear death. I felt quite sure that the quiet peace and happiness which I felt just then was something I should always have. I'm not going to pretend that I started to read the Bible or kneeling down to pray, but I found myself thinking more about God than I had ever done before. As I went about my work, I felt sure he knew all that I was thinking, good and bad. During the next few months, I could scarcely understand my own self. My whole outlook on life was changing. I saw things in a different light. I started to go to church again because I felt I wanted to. The words of hymns and prayers had a different meaning. I could read a chapter in the Bible without thinking as I used to do. There is plenty of time for that when I'm older. I began to understand what Sister Birch meant when she spoke of Christ as someone she knew. I was beginning to feel the same. I no longer thought of God as someone up there in the sky whom we would meet when we get old and die, as I had thought since childhood, but someone that was alive and real. I didn't feel like that until I heard Sister Birch preach. I can't explain what moved me, but something did. I guess I was like most other people. I believed all the stories we had been taught about Christ's life on earth, but no preacher ever made me feel as she did then, that Christ is alive today, as much as he was nearly 2,000 years ago, ready to help and guide any of us, if only we ask for it. At the end of the Church Army campaign, the rector followed it up with a similar weekly meeting at the rectory, which we all enjoyed very much. Then at one meeting he asked us to talk or write about what religion meant to us. I tried several times to write just how I felt, but I could never find the right words. Then one day, without any trouble, I wrote this piece of poetry. Grieve not for me, when from this world I'm gone, for I shall be going to my Father's home. I know there is a place there prepared for me, where I can watch and wait for thee. Twice I have been told that I've nearly gone on that long journey to the great beyond. But God reads our hearts, and he knew that I was a sinner and not ready to die. Scarcely a thought I gave to him, just going through life for pleasure and sin. Only in danger did I think of prayer. Even then, seldom thanked him for all his care. Lots of us thought there was plenty of time to think of religion and things of that kind. But that, I found out for myself, was quite wrong. We need to begin when we're really quite young. For none of us know when our time might come to begin our journey to the heavenly home. So let's begin right now as we go through life's way to spare a few moments for God every day. He is always beside us, so there's no need to say, I'm ever so busy and there's no time to pray. Just tell him our troubles as we go on with our work. He understands. For our thoughts, he can read like a book. We can't all be preachers if we're not all gifted that way, but there are plenty of things we can do in other ways. Just a kind word to others as a helping hand, then let's put in a word for God when we can. Now I'd just like to tell you of a wonderful thing that happened to me. It was back in the spring. As I sat quietly thinking one day, I knew that Christ had entered my heart to stay. Believe me, dear friends, there's no joy to compare to the joy that you know when he's dwelling there. So do not delay if you're not trusting in him, but open your hearts and let him come in. No one could have been more surprised than I was. I have never written anything like that before or since. It was my own thoughts expressed for me. I realized then that God does help you if you really are sincere in the things you want to say or do. As time went by, I felt more and more that I wanted to tell my family and others how I felt, but I could never do it. It takes a lot of courage to admit that you do believe in God. I found that religion is something like politics. It can easily lead to an argument. I can remember quite clearly reading that poem to my children and telling them that I'd written it. My oldest son then was about 12 years old, yet I can still see his serious face as he looked at me and said, "It's very nice, Mum, but I don't think you wrote it. You must have copied it out from a book." Many things came home to me just then. He made me realize that I was a poor example for what I had written. I knew that many things I told them not to say or do was what I often said and did myself. I also realized that no matter what happens to make us feel different inwardly, others still judge us by what we say and do. I know only too well that it isn't easy to break oneself of any bad habits which we may have started during our lifetime. I've often been interested in listening to the opinions of others about religion and the existence of God. After these past 3 years, no one will ever make me believe that God doesn't exist. It was during my illness, just 3 years ago, that I found the true meaning of prayer and faith in God. When I woke up from my first real sleep after 3 weeks of fighting against faintness and unconsciousness that kept coming over me, I couldn't understand why I should feel that God had saved me to do something for Him. Just then I was too weary to bother about anything. All I wanted to do was sleep. Both doctors said I was worrying about something. Although I denied it, I suppose in a way they were right. So much went through my mind as I lay thinking. I had never bothered before what other people felt. But just then, when I thought I was going to die, it seemed so important to me that I should say something to my family. I wanted so much to tell of the quiet happiness I had known since that night I had seen Christ on the cross. I wanted to say to them to give a little more thought to God, to be prepared for anything that might happen, but I couldn't say it. I shall never forget the morning when I finally got up. I felt so sick, and every few minutes faintness kept coming over me. I knew I couldn't fight much more. Then the thought of my husband and 2 sons left with no one to look after them was more than I could bear. I broke down and cried. Then I prayed as I'd never prayed before, to be given strength to fight this awful weakness. Then I remembered that the doctor was coming again that afternoon. No doctor could have been kinder than he had been during the past week. Yet I couldn't forget that at the beginning he said I was giving way to nerves. I wondered if he still thought that way. He had no idea how much that hurt. Neither did he know that if anything could rouse me, normally my temper, it was to accuse me of something which I felt wasn't true. I felt I had to prove to him that I wasn't giving away to nerves. But how could I? When I could scarcely stand up by myself, I knew I was getting weaker all the time. Then I suddenly thought, God had answered my prayers before. Why should I doubt Him now? If I can get downstairs before the doctor comes, he will know that I wasn't giving way to nerves. So trying to prove something to him, I proved to myself the moving of faith in God. With help, I did get up, but those first 2 or 3 months were one long nightmare. I lived in a sort of trance. Nothing seemed real. I knew there were times when I was as near to collapsing as I had been when I first gave in, but I was still determined not to give in again. So many things happened during those first few weeks, which couldn't all be passed off as fate or coincidence. If I had ever doubted God's existence before, I should have had to admit that I felt something was guiding and encouraging me. Just then, not being able to do much work, television was practically my only interest, not only for the entertainment side of it, but the serious programs as well. I can truthfully say that I had learnt more and had a far deeper understanding of things that really mattered in life than I had ever done before. There was one program on television which helped me quite a lot. It was called Meeting Point, where people from all walks of life met and talked about religion. Several of them spoke about things that had happened in their lives which had made them realize the existence of God. One young man in particular interested me very much. He had been suffering from some lung trouble, but when the specialist found out what was wrong, it was too late to do anything about it. He was told that 3 months was the longest he could hope to live. Then he said, "Someone told me that God could cure me if only I would believe it and pray for it to happen." He said, "It took me a little while to believe it, but when I did, my lungs started to heal. I made a rapid recovery, and in 6 months I was in the army during my national service." Listening to him made me think of Mr. Jim Wilson when he gave us a lecture on prayer and faith healing. He told us of the work they were doing in London, where clergy and doctors worked together to help people that were really ill. He told of many cases, some with incurable diseases, that had been cured by prayer and their faith in God. I also thought of our previous rector, when afterwards he started a weekly prayer meeting here, which I refused to join because at that time I thought it was a mockery. I had no doubt that God answered prayers. I approved that over and over again. But I found it hard to believe that people given up by doctors as being beyond medical aid could be cured by prayer and their faith in God. But after these past 3 years, I shall never again say that it couldn't happen. I found how much prayer can help us in our daily lives, and I sincerely believe that by asking God's help, anything can be accomplished. Somehow that young man convinced me more than any previous talks I'd heard. He made me feel that such things could happen. Maybe I was more impressed because he and many of the others that spoke were just ordinary looking people like myself. I had been up 6 weeks then, yet I still felt very weak and ill. I often wondered why I was making no progress, but listening to him made me realize many things. I knew apart from praying so hard that morning, I hadn't given God a second thought. I hadn't even thanked him for giving me the strength to get up. My only thoughts during those weeks had been the doctor. I was so determined that he should have no second chance to say I was giving way to nerves, yet I shall always be grateful to him, because I know if he hadn't said that, I should never have gotten up again. As I have already said, I was unable to do much work just then, so I had plenty of time to think. I began to understand many things that had puzzled me before. I had every reason during the next few weeks to believe that what had been said was true. Anyway, then on, I began to think and feel different and was soon able to do my own work. It was while I still felt very ill that the thought first came to me to write this. At that time, I really didn't think that I would get better. I thought it would be one of my ways of letting the family know what I wanted to say to them. About the same time, I could not help noticing how often in various services, these 2 or 3 phrases kept cropping up. It was, God is life, if only people would believe it, and we are all put on this earth to do something for God. Also, God puts thoughts and ideas into our minds for us to follow. I thought a lot about these few words just then. Also of the strange feeling I'd had when I was so ill. I wondered if the urge to write this had come from God, because he knew I hadn't the courage to say what I wanted to say. I also wondered if it was a challenge to me, because I laughed and said I didn't believe it when I first heard it said, that when medicine and drugs had failed, prayer had been successful. And about 18 months later, I began to feel very ill again, yet I had been so sure that I would get really well. I was told that I had a blood disease, cancer, and that nothing could be done about it. All the old doubts started coming back again. To me, it just didn't make sense. Why had God saved me when I was so ill to take me now when I had so much more faith in him? Then my thoughts flew back to those few days, especially that morning when I prayed so hard for strength to get up. I remembered all I had said, and I knew that God hadn't failed me. It was I who had failed him. I believe that God can read all our thoughts, knew how I felt just then, and gave me those extra months to do something about it. But I had done nothing. Many times during the next few weeks, I was tempted to burn this. There seemed no point in writing it if I wasn't to get better, but somehow I couldn't. Feeling as I did just then, there were days when I would have welcomed death, were it not for the fact that I felt I had so much to live for. So much had happened in the past 18 months. The boys had both married. I no longer had to worry about them, and my daughter had presented me with my first grandchild. Their weekly visits was something I looked forward to very much, but I must admit, the thought of leaving them all did at times make me feel very low. Then gradually the same determination not to give in came back. I knew that my life was in God's hands and that no drugs or willpower could save me if he chose to take me. Yet at the same time, I couldn't help thinking of the different talks I had heard. I felt if others had fought disease by believing God could cure them, so could I. But I think it was the thought that there was no cure for cancer which gave me the courage not to give in. I thought if I lived, it would prove to myself and others that God did exist. Also, that it might be a little encouragement to people like Mr. Wilson, who made it their life's work trying to make others believe it. But it was a very moving sermon by Dr. Billy Graham that finally decided me to finish writing this. In it, he said, "The trouble of the world today is that they think they can live without God, but that is not true. If we want to live, we have to do God's will, not our own." He also said, "There wouldn't be nearly as much sickness and disease in the world as there is today if people prayed and thought more about God." Another year has passed since I started writing this, but I have only to think back over these past 4 years to believe him. Although I had firmly believed in God several years before that, it was during my illness and after that I found something that I had never had before, which is far from easy to explain: faith. I guess we are all given one chance in life to realize the existence of God. So I would like to add one thing. Don't be like me, afraid to admit it, because you feel someone will laugh. There will always be someone near to criticize. I found that to believe in God is the one thing that can make life really worth living. Believe me, you will be rewarded with a quiet peace and happiness that lasts. The thought of death doesn't worry me, but I have often dreaded the thought that I might have to spend weeks in bed waiting for it. But since I've written this, even that fear has gone. I only feel a sense of deep peace and satisfaction, knowing that at last I have done something which for some time I felt I had to do. It is over 30 years ago when I wrote this, but only quite recently did I come across it again. I sat down and read it, and my thoughts flew back over the past year, which for me hadn't been easy, owing to very high blood pressure. Just then I was feeling really ill, often wondering how many more days before I had to give in. As the days went by and I had a bad day, or I felt low, I would read it again. Gradually, that quiet peace of mind came back again. I no longer worried about what might happen. I decided to take each day as it comes, thank God, each night for another day, and leave the future to Him. But each time I read it, I was more convinced than ever. There was a lot of truth in what I had written, and that God does help us if we ask for it. It was about the same time that my grandchild brought her boyfriend to see me. He was Polish. They had come to England to be married. She said, "He is very religious, Gran. Show him what you wrote years ago." I shall never forget his reaction after he had read it. He got up and said, "You must not put that away again. You must let others read it." Had he been elderly, I doubt if I would have thought much about it. But coming from a young lad in his early 20s, he made a deep impression on me. I know now why he spoke like that. He is now living in Poland as a preacher. I'm sure just then it helped me quite a lot every time I read it. At the same time, I felt quite guilty. I knew he was right. I was wrong in keeping it to myself all these years, and I should have shared it with others. But not being serious by nature, I very much doubt that anyone knowing me would believe I had written it. I know now that I have something more serious than high blood pressure. It is a growth, and I had a stroke. For weeks I felt very low and ill. It was a chance remark by the doctor that started me off doing some more serious thinking. It also renewed my faith in God. He said, "You seem to have found new life from somewhere." I knew it wasn't tablets that had helped me over the past year because I had to give them up. They were making me worse. For some time now, I have felt that my time on earth is nearly over. It doesn't worry me. I know I have found something that was a great comfort and encouragement to me. It was a program on television. Every Sunday morning, all sorts of people met and talked about some serious illness they had, how prayer and belief in God had helped them overcome it. I thought a lot about one man. He said he had a malignant growth. He was given radium treatment, which hadn't been successful. He knew he only had a little time to live. He said, "For days, I kept thinking of people who claimed they had been cured by prayer and their faith in God." He kept praying. Then one evening, he had a feeling that someone was near, telling him to try and walk. With difficulty, he stood up. After that, he walked 2 or 3 more steps every day. Now he can walk down the road to his neighbor. He has great faith now that he shall get really well. I could understand how he felt. For years, I thought I knew what faith in God meant, but it was nothing compared to what I learned this past 2 years. So many times during the past 2 years, I felt like saying, I know I'm not getting any better, so I might as well give in. But every time I felt like that, something always seems to crop up to change my mind. I thought back all those years ago when I laughed and said I didn't believe it. When I first heard it said that people given up by doctors as being beyond medical aid could be cured by prayer and their faith in God. Now I firmly believe it can happen. Life for me during those 30 years have gone by much the same as for anyone else. I enjoyed the services on television, but I never went to church. The weekly visits from my growing family was what I lived for. It would take too long to try and make others understand why I feel that God is always near, ready to help and quieten us. I've often heard it said that God works through others to make us understand. I believe that. I also believe that prayer can also help us a lot. I don't mean that I think we should always be on our knees praying. But when life's problems seem too much for us, just ask His help. Often you will find the answer will come from someone else, often from someone you would least expect it from. When I think about this, it seems almost laughable that something I wrote all those years ago, which I had hoped would help my family, but who until a few months ago knew nothing about, should turn up again to help me in my old age. I'm sure it has. Just recently, I've started reading a book called Healing the Sick. In it, thousands of people from all over the world said the same thing. Something they had been suffering from for years had been cured by prayer and faith in God. It was my granddaughter's husband that first made me realize that I might have helped others if I had let them read it. At the moment they are here on holiday, so I am giving this to them, hoping that being a preacher, he might find something in it that would help them with the work they are doing in Poland. So those of you who don't know us, maybe we've never met before, I am Wendy.
I'm Jacek.
Otherwise known as Jack for those who can't pronounce his name. We'd like to say thank you for watching the video, but we also wanted to give a little bit more explanation behind why we decided to put it into a video form this time round. Some of you may have already got the copy that Jacek had written out when Granny Wheadon had given it to us way back in '92, which is one of the reasons why the date was listed for '92. But after thinking about it, obviously the journal entry, the diary, had been written way back in maybe her 1940s. Either way, we got it, and that's why it was posted for '92. But just recently, Jacek came across this letter again, and going through his documents, and he was so convicted to put it into a video form. So we collaborated on this. As you can see, he has the gift of behind the scenes, and yeah, I'm trying my best to do the recording, the audio, but we wanted to do it this way, and we want to say thank you also for all of those who have kindly sent the photos that I was able to insert into the video. So we thank you. May we encourage you to share this with other family members and friends, that other people's lives will be blessed. I know that would truly bless Granny Wheadon, because that was her heart's desire. So we thank you so much, and hopefully we get the chance to meet in the not so distant future. You take care.
And I would like to say something extra. if you don't mind. Of course you don't mind because I'm talking. I would like to tell you that I'm 64 right now, and I would love to know who were my grandparents or great-grandparents, and I have no idea. So therefore, I would like to, together with Wendy, give you as a gift to the young generation of Wheadons, that you may know who was your great-grandma or great-great-grandma, and that you will know what she was going through, what was her struggles, and this will somehow will paint a picture of that she is your roots, she is embedded in your family, and you just came out of her. So I think that it will be good for you to know what she was believing in and what she was struggling with. And she mentioned that she was very shy. She was almost afraid to tell you what Wendy read in her letter or poem or whatever you call it. But I believe that it will be very good for you to pay attention to every word what your grandma said, because I would like to hear what my great-grandfather said or great-grandmother, and I never had a chance. So this is, I believe, very important for you, you young generation of Wheadons. God bless you.
God bless you. Bye for now.